Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Triad of the Force podcast, a podcast from three Puerto Rican friends coming together to do deep dives into Star Wars and other nerd-related media. This is season 2, episode 3, and today we're going to be doing things a little bit differently. Goose, why don't you tell us how we arrived to the idea of this episode and introduce our guest for the day?
It was fantastic because it was a serendipitous thing that happened while on the Twitterverse, scrolling down the Twitter as one does when one is bored, and like going to the infinite, Twitters that people put that usually suck. All of a sudden, one stood out that said, "The Last Jedi is better than The Godfather." Changed my mind or something like that, and I was like, "Holy shit!" Someone went there. This is amazing. And I went to see it was from our guest today, Josie from Film Posers. When I saw that, I just had like she has to come to our show. One, diversify the things that we talk about, and two, keep it within our conversation of representation and Puerto Ricans in film, and just come in and just talk about a little bit of Star Wars, a little bit of Godfather, and who knows what else. So, welcome, Josie.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad that my tweet inspired you in a way.
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely inspiring because Last Jedi is such a contentious film, even to this day. And I don't know if that translates outside of Star Wars fandom. So we're definitely looking forward to seeing your thoughts when we keep moving forward with the conversation. But before going into all that, let's go into you a little bit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, what you're currently doing now? So let's go over there first.
Yeah, so my name is Josie Meléndez. On Twitter, you can find me as @theJosieMarie, where sometimes I have some really nice hot takes. and I'm a Puerto Rican writer, but I'm also a film and TV critic with the Film Posers, which is a podcast I founded with my co-hosts, Gabriela, Juan, and Ana, where we just talk about films and television shows that we're loving from our cultural perspective. Because often it started because a lot of people sometimes get a little bit pretentious about the films they're watching, and then we started seeing people calling other people film posers because their taste wasn't adequate. And we were like, we're going to take ownership of that name and rewrite it entirely, because our whole thing is that we believe that films should be for everybody, and your taste and what you like shouldn't define who you are as a person, or like if it's good or bad. I think art is subjective, so what you like should be subjective as well.
That's fantastic. So that's really interesting. Taking. I always like that thing of people taking something that's meant to be a slur or an insult and kind of using as an empowerment term. So awesome. So I definitely follow you guys on Twitter. So definitely, because we have to, us Puerto Ricans, we have to always support each other. So when I saw there was like a group of podcasters that were focusing on film from that Puerto Rican perspective, and I was like, okay, we have to definitely follow these guys to see what's happening and support each other. So like I want to know a little bit more about you and Film Posers, and tell us a little bit more about how you guys are like approaching film, and like how your cultural background and our Puerto Ricanness informs how you're looking at these films, and not just how you're looking at films, but how you're critiquing and talking about them in the discourse.
Yeah, a lot of the times we come at it from a diverse perspective in terms of are people being represented evenly and equally on the screen. So sometimes it's very visual. Other times we look at who's writing these films, and they don't have to be Puerto Rican, but we want to see more people of color in those positions, like in front of and behind the camera. Like, for example, right now, it's the first time that we've seen so many female directors nominated for Best Director. And not just only that, like it's the first time that we see women of color being nominated. So those are the kinds of things that we like to boost, especially considering that we come from a background where Puerto Rico, it's so diverse. And usually what we see is that diversity, and not being able to see that on screen, it's bothersome because it's not the reality that we live with. So why is it being painted that way when it's not real?
Mm-hmm. It's like one of those things when like film studios come to film a movie in Puerto Rico and then it's Brazil or it's Cuba or something like that. It's never Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico's never Puerto Rico, and Puerto Ricans are never Puerto Ricans unless it's like West Side Story and we're all carrying knives and killing people in alleys in New York. Then we're Puerto Ricans.
Yeah. We talked about that once on when we discussed Latinx Heritage Month because we never grew up celebrating Latinx Heritage Month in Puerto Rico. The closest thing we had was La Noche Puertorriqueña. And even then we started discussing how, at least in my history class, it was very upsetting the fact that during the Spanish-American War in the textbook, it was in English. So the class was in Spanish, but the book was in English. But in the book, it was one paragraph and it was like the U.S. acquired some islands. We weren't even named in the history book. It was like the U.S. just acquired some islands. They went shopping. That was it. And we were here like, that is our history. That is some historical trauma. Why are you glossing over it? So definitely bringing in some of that into the stories that we're dissecting as critics. Because sometimes when you mention when films come here to shoot, we're either Cuba or Brazil, or even then in TV shows recently, most of the Latin American shows that have like that Latin American family that lives in the United States, the actors are Puerto Rican, but they're being Cubans or Mexicans or Venezuelans. They're never Puerto Ricans.
It's something that's very, very shocking, and like it's one of those things where it's like kind of complicated in terms of the discourse because there are other Latinas, right, that deserve to be represented somehow. So it's like this fine line of like, okay, how much do we ask in terms of like Puerto Rican representation and stuff? How much do we kind of let go in terms of the wider scope of Latinx representation? So that's kind of like one of those weird questions that at least personally I think about when we're talking about Puerto Ricans in film and Latinas in film.
Yeah, and also I think the positive side is that we don't focus just on like Puerto Rican culture when we're discussing films, because nobody goes around every day like, yes, I'm Puerto Rican, so I'm only going to talk about Puerto Rican things. Like right now we're going to be talking about Star Wars. Like you can like whatever you like. You don't have to just like stuff that is from your culture. So I think that's the beauty of it, like being able to discuss other things and not being expected to just discuss things from your culture.
Which is sorry, keep going.
Sorry. No, I just want to say, like, it's interesting because it's when it comes to the visual aspect of it, because from a music perspective, Puerto Rico, it's like more well known. It's like everybody knows like a Puerto Rican musical artist. But then when it comes to the visual films aspect of it, how do you define or pinpoint like, oh, that's a person from Puerto Rico, or that's a Boricua? Like, what defines? And it's a question. I don't know. Maybe it's a part of like being the colonial system we've always been in. We've always been defined by somebody else. We've never been the ones defining ourselves from a international perspective. I don't know. I think that intermingles there a lot.
Yeah,
all those things too of like how we're supposed to look like too, right?
Yeah, like when it comes to Bad Bunny, I think the reason I was so fond of him was because it was one of those few, because it's been done throughout history, but it's the first time that someone unapologetically pushes our culture into mainstream media and nobody pushes back.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so fond of him, especially like his musical. He doesn't hold back on like the colloquialisms, and it's very interesting to see how East LA loves Bad Bunny, and I like out of all places.
It's weird. Like it wouldn't make sense that Bad Bunny will be the one that's most loved, but it just happens to be that.
Well, especially just doing that while still singing in Spanish. I think it's one of the most important things, because he could have been like, well, I need to do the crossover to mainstream, so let's start rapping in Spanish, but in English, sorry. So like the fact that he's still doing it in Spanish, and like you said, like using our colloquialisms is what's been the most amazing aspect of it all. Like the this is not like the Luis Fonsi Despacito thing where it's like very distilled tourism, Uber pop veneer, right? This is just like the grit of Puerto Rican music, right? Which doesn't translate to film, I don't think. I still think
it doesn't. I think there's the visual aspect of it. Like we are okay, almost like we have a voice, but we don't have a face.
Every time someone says we have a voice, I think of the King's Speech. I'm sorry. Every single time.
Wow.
I have a voice. Yeah. Thank you, Colin. Sorry, Mo. Keep going.
But it's also like recently I was able to watch the Rita Moreno doc, and at the end, at the very end credits, they played Preciosa, and I started crying because I'd never heard that in a film. I was like, what? Like you could tell that Puerto Ricans were involved in the project.
So, but speaking of that documentary, that was a documentary that was filmed for the Sundance Film Festival, if I'm not mistaken. And I know that you and Film Posers have had involvement in like the Sundance Festival. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I think that's a big deal to share with everybody here.
It was crazy because if I'm not mistaken, at least from what we heard from our small group, because there were a couple of critics from Puerto Rico that were able to go. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Gabriela and I were the only female critics de la Isla that were able to go, which is crazy because it's nice to be able to like have that representation, but also it's kind of sad because I know so many female critics in Puerto Rico that weren't able to go. So hopefully we see more of that in the upcoming years, but still we were very happy. It was pretty much an honor to be able to cover Sundance because we've only been around for a year. So I think it spoke a lot to the time and effort that we were putting into this. And at least for me, like, I'm always like, let's do this unapologetically. The worst that can happen is that someone is going to tell you no, and then you can just try again.
Yep.
So I think that was my favorite part.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's amazing. So what were tell us like maybe like 2 or 3 of your favorite films that let's be equal. 2 or 3 of your favorite films and 2 or 3 of the worst films that were at the festival. Yeah, we got a positive, negative, light and dark side. We gotta do it.
So it's hard to say. I'm gonna start with the bad. It's hard to say that they were bad. It was just that sometimes things don't speak to you. And for example, one of them was this one. John and the Hole. I thought it was gonna be a great hit. I thought A24 was gonna pick it up because it's a perfect premise for them. But there's almost no point to the story. It's just a privileged white kid that holds his family hostage and then nothing happens to him. It's just a slice of life film. It's like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but make it very dark. And Ferris Bueller's Day Off like actually has a purpose. There is a story, there is a metaphor, there is a message to it. But this one, it was just again a spoiled white kid who holds his family hostage and then spends all his parents' savings on discounted, like it wasn't even Popeyes, but I'm pretty sure it was supposed to be Popeyes. So he was just buying chicken, and I'm like, and a TV, and I'm like, what's happening? And then they tease a lot of things.
It was not a movie that's not self-aware.
No. It was we were a bit disappointed because again it felt like an A24 film and we're like, yes, they're gonna buy this, it's gonna be everywhere, but no, the feedback wasn't, like, the responses from critics weren't that positive, which is sad because it was promising as a premise.
Well, so was Wonder Woman 1984, but
I liked Wonder Woman 1984.
Really? Oh my god! Please tell us why, because I was like, okay, we're diverging here from our main topic, which is good.
My thing is that I don't see them as sequels. I see one as like a film about Wonder Woman, and then Wonder Woman 1984 for me is Diana's film. Like we see her as a human woman who just wants to be selfish, and we never get to see her be selfish. So I thought that was interesting. And I just really love Pedro Pascal's performance because he was going so hard on his role, and I'm like, it's not that deep, but I appreciate it.
I mean, 2020 was the year of Pedro Pascal, without a shadow of a doubt. I don't know. I just feel like, and everyone, please feel free to chime in with your Wonder Woman opinions. But I just feel like Wonder Woman 1984, like, yes, I think it had like some really cool like ideas, but I think it had too many ideas, and it like had some issues stringing them together. And like the first quarter of it was like had like a certain tone, and then it shifted tones to like be this completely different movie. And so there was like some dissonance between what it was doing originally and then what it, and like I don't know if it was like studio meddling or them being confused about like what the movie wanted to be, but I don't know, didn't land for me. But like you said, I think movies are geared
definitely
for people to receive them, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. There was some dissonance when it came to tone.
I still have not watched it, so I cannot.
No.
It's on demand.
I didn't like the first Wonder Woman. I thought it was boring. I thought it was meant. I don't know. It didn't feel like that was the Wonder Woman we deserved, if that makes any sense.
But it was the one we needed.
I think it was just the one we got.
He was doing the subversion to the Dark Knight there.
Yeah, I know. But so that's why I haven't seen it. The only reason I will actually watch it is because for either Pedro Pascal or Kristen Wiig, those will be the roles I will actually watch it for.
No, I remember I had to remind myself that it was a family film because there was a part when Kristen Wiig starts going after a man in an alley, and I'm like, finish him! And then I'm like, wait, no, it's a kid's film.
Which talks again to the tone problem. It's just like one time it's like super bright and hopeful and inclusive, and then it's just like, no, we're gonna tackle some real shit now, and we're gonna focus on it. Like, wait, what? Where are we?
Yeah, I think because it could have been deeper. I think there was definitely some holding back from. I don't know if it was people holding back or the writers. I don't know what happened, but I think there was definitely like too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah,
I think it felt in a way like Batman Forever, Batman and Robin type of situation. It's like too many things happening, too many villains, and like not enough space for things to just cook and simmer. But
and actually explore those characters more. But oh well.
We'll have Wonder Woman 3, so it's fine.
Yes.
But we talked about your least favorite film from Sundance. What was your favorite film out of Sundance Festival?
Okay, so 3 real quickly. Coda, which was acquired by Apple. Summer of Soul. So good. It was directed by Questlove, and it's about the same year when Woodstock was happening. There was this other festival, and it was all Black artists, and they go a bit into the Black history of Harlem and the Harlem Renaissance Festival. But there was a part where they mentioned like Nuyorican culture, which I was very surprised. I think my favorite part of Sundance was that Puerto Rican culture was in so many films, not just the Rita Moreno documentary, especially Judas and the Black Messiah, which is my third one, which they talked about the young lords, which at least I didn't learn about them growing up in my history classes. I learned about them recently, talking with Puerto Ricans that lived in Chicago and like study the young lords. So to be able to see that in a film, I got a little bit teary-eyed. Like they showed the flag and everything, and usually we're not included in other stories that aren't made by us. So it was nice to see that. And that film is going to be on HBO February 12th.
Oh, very nice.
I have it on my Letterboxd list to watch.
Yes.
And they're doing a lot of promo. They're definitely doing a lot of promo for Judas and the Black Messiah. So I'm glad to know it has your seal of approval.
It's good. It's good.
Because sometimes they hype like these dramas, and then it just ended up being like, I don't know, like it like
Honestly,
one night in Miami,
yeah.
I saw it and like it did nothing for me.
For me, it was the pacing.
Mm-hmm.
It was the pacing.
Oh, One Night in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because it felt, and I didn't know it was a stage play until after I was watching it. But while I was watching it, I'm like, this feels like a stage play. Like it just feels like it doesn't feel like a movie. And then I was texting with a friend of mine. He's like, oh yeah, that's because it is. And I'm like, well, they just did a 1-to-1 translation. That shit don't work. You gotta, I don't know, you gotta fix that up because I don't know. It was too slow and it felt disjointed again, so it didn't feel cohesive. So
yeah, I remember someone tweeted, "You can tell a film is a stage play when people stay in the same room for 2 hours."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is literally what that movie does. It's like there's one scene in one thing, one scene in another. Yeah. It would have been like funny if like the people in the background would just change the background around them instead of just them actually walking somewhere else. So it would really hammer the point home.
Yeah. Though I think One Night in Miami has my most favorite title card, which is that was actually the picture for the playbill for the play, which is when he's underwater and it just says One Night in Miami, and I'm like, that's beautiful.
I mean, visually, I think the film is fantastic, but I don't know.
Yeah, visually it's good, but I agree. For me, it was so slow, and it makes me sad because I hope to enjoy it a little bit.
But that's a good segue, talking about slow movies and movies that don't hit home for us, to go then into the one half of the meat and potatoes of this main conversation, which is Last Jedi versus The Godfather. And obviously, when I say slow and boring, I am not talking about The Last Jedi. I am definitely talking about The Godfather, because it seems that we are split down the middle here between two people that think that The Godfather is amazing and engaging and not boring, and two people that think that it is boring. So I'm going to open up the floor. Josie, you first to tell us your thoughts on The Godfather, then Mo, then Nani, and I can chime in with our gushing.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just I watched it for a class, of course, because I was studying dramatic writing up until last May. And for one of the class, we were studying story structure and for our feature writing class. So he made us watch The Godfather. And I think that contributes to a little bit of my disdain because I was watching it for a class. But I'm very picky with my pacing, as we just discussed with One Night in Miami. And for me, The Godfather is a bit slow. I wouldn't call it boring because I tend to be a little bit I'm too nice. So I do respect the boring comment, but I tend to be a little bit too nice with films. But I was a little bored, though I can appreciate what they were trying to do, especially for the genre. And a little fact, I love films that have Italian because I get to practice my Italian. Because I don't need subtitles. I'm just there. I feel like a Snoop, just like,
It's like, I see what you did there.
Yeah. I'm so cool. I can understand you.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's like, when there's a Spanish movie and my friends in Chicago are just like, do we need to turn on the subtitles? It's like, I don't need subtitles. I know what's up. It's like Pan's Labyrinth. Don't dub that. It's fine.
Yes, and I think the other thing that I like about the film is character-wise. I think it's a good character study for people wanting to learn how to write compelling characters. But again, it just, I remember the moment I started that I was officially like, yes, I do not like this film. And it was when they kill Michael's wife when they kill her with the car bomb.
Oh, Apollonia. Yeah. We were talking about that. That's the piece of the movie that we can get rid of completely.
Exactly. I'm like, was it necessary? I understand how it helps with his character, but visually speaking and story structure wise, you've already gone through this entire story. It starts to feel like another movie.
Yeah.
So I'm like, at this point, I'm like, you're being a little pretentious, Coppola. You're like, I have you at the palm of my hand. You got through this entire movie. I'm just gonna throw this in.
Interesting. Because we were doing our pre-discussion, and that's the scene we were discussing. That it's like, okay, maybe at this part the movie lags a little bit because it's just the whole movie just stops. It's like we go to Italy and it stops. And it's just a lot is going on, but not a lot that even when he comes back to New York, it's not really consequential in terms of like the main plot. So Mo, you felt differently, Mo, though, about the Italy sequence because it reminded you of Cinema Paradiso, was it?
Yeah, it just felt like, honestly, the whole movie is a boredom sandwich. It has three breads. That has the wedding, the baptism, and the Italian. Everything in the middle is just more boring things. Oh, she's there. Yeah. So
she agrees.
Yes, the way I see, I can appreciate what they were trying to do. I love movies that use the silence as a component. It's a heavily music based film, and then when you have the specific scenes where it's just like silence, and then you feel all the tension, everything. They're great scenes. It's just boring. It just lags. I will sit there and be like, there's a whole scene between like passing, and then there's just looking at an archway, and it's like, okay, sure, it's artsy, but you don't need that. You're that's not helping the story. You're not building into, like, it just felt like just dragging and dragged. The characters they just didn't evolve for me. Like at the beginning, you knew where everybody was pretty much gonna end. You just felt like their story was just like a straightforward path. It was just a matter of like, okay, what's gonna happen for Michael to become the next Don? What's gonna happen for everybody else to either succumb to that new rule or just disappear?
It's interesting, but I think that's not necessarily a bug. Predictability doesn't mean inherently that it's boring. Because, for example, to tie it to Star Wars, I know the good guys are going to win. I know Rey's not going to follow the dark side.
No, but
that doesn't make it less uncompelling.
But it's the actual ending of it. It's the fact that, right off the bat, you get exposure to Michael, and it's like, oh yeah, it's the one that's denying the family, and oh, I'm not gonna be like my family. You already know that's the character that's gonna end up precisely just like. Then there's this whole love for like violence, to put it in any other words, which lacks. It honestly lacked to me. Like, I would expect somebody like Michael that's coming back from, oh, I'm learning from the mistakes of my family. Like throughout the whole history, it's like, yeah, we're trying to shift into a not so violent aspect. We already know blood is expensive. But no, let's go out and kill everybody. Like, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen it. Half of the people there.
Spoiler alert for a 40-year-old movie. Just in case, kids. Just in case. Right. Just in case you didn't read the Wikipedia article either. Everyone dies.
There will be countless ways to find somebody, how to find somebody, how to kill somebody. And then...
which keeps going, the Saw films. How do we kill people more creatively? What?
But it's almost like the movie itself put itself against like its own constraints. It's like, I have to now up the ante. Like, all of a sudden, like you Michael's like firing in the street. That's supposed to be like a big scene. Like, it was in the middle of the street. It was the middle of broad daylight, and then you have a car exploding and killing somebody's brand new. Like, it's like, let's keep pulling the ante, and then it's just boring. I'm not gonna like back away from it. It's just a boring about white dudes talking very slowly about their business. That's it.
Oh no.
Nani, I feel like you're ready to explode. So go.
I am a huge fan of The Godfather. I've loved it. I have always loved it. I rewatched it yesterday, actually, and I hadn't seen it in years, but I loved it even more watching it again. I think there's something so compelling about it. I mean, even from the beginning, it starts just in black and you can just hear Bonacera's voice and, talking about how proud he is to, try to be an American and all these things. And then Marlon Brando's reaction, like, you're disrespecting me. You should come with friendship. Like, that whole setup of that scene is just like mob movies 101. And just Marlon Brando's portrayal of that character throughout is so amazing because this is the guy that is the bad guy. And there's so many times throughout the movie that you feel so bad for him. There's something about the time when he gets shot. He's just trying to buy fruit. Makes me want to cry. When he presents, Bonacera with Sonny's corpse, the face that he makes, it's like you feel, so many emotions for. There's so emotions that get wrung out from this character who's the bad guy in the film that I think is so incredibly well done. Obviously, the score is magnificent, and even the Italy scene I actually kind of love because it shows like a different side of the whole thing. I don't know. I'm actually a huge fan. I don't think the pacing is bad. I have my issues with the second one. The second one is like 3 films in one. It's way too long, I think. So there are people that think that the second one is better. I disagree. But yeah, I know. But the first one is, I think, amazing, and it's a family film too. Like at the core of it is a movie about this family and the interactions.
When you said family film, I thought you were like,
no.
It's a film. This ain't The Lion King.
Well, The Lion King shouldn't be for kids either, with the brother.
True. Good point. Good point.
So I digress. Some Disney films are not really for children. Yeah.
No.
Hunchback of Notre Dame.
That's fucked up. Not for kids. Shit. No.
Not for kids at all. But it is a film about family at its core, which is one of the similarities that I think you find with Star Wars as well. That at its core, Star Wars, what has been presented so far is a film about family. So I think The Godfather is amazing. So sorry.
I don't want to keep beating a dead horse.
Why are you sorry? Don't be sorry. That's embrace your.
Never apologize.
Never
apologize. Never apologize for liking a classic.
What do you think?
I'm not gonna beat a dead horse on it because I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I've talked a lot, so I don't want to keep talking too much. But Godfather, I don't know. It's one of those quintessential. I don't even remember when I saw it the first time, and I remember when I saw it, it just blew my goddamn mind because it was like one of those few movies that I've seen that, like, because of the pace. One of the things I like is the pacing because the pacing is deliberate. It's just like it's a crescendo always. Like the movie just keeps building up to moments, and it's a character study at the end of the day. It's like everything that happens is tangential to the stories of Michael and Vito, and it's just like where one wants his son to follow in a path, and that son thinks that he's in that path, ends up doing the sins of the father, and you're just like falling into that cycle of sin over and over again, even though that they're deluding themselves into believing something else. But I think it's an extremely psychological film, more so than any than a crime movie or a mobster film, even though it influenced every single knockoff. I haven't seen Gotti yet, the John Travolta movie, but I just have to because it's just like I've read it's so fucking terrible and such a bad ripoff of Godfather and Goodfellas that I just need to see John Travolta's terrible wig. But Godfather influenced all of that shit and then gave us, like, before Empire Strikes Back did it for every other film afterwards, then gave us a better sequel. It's just like, hey, you like this shit? We're gonna give you an even better one. And here you go. You're gonna like it. And it was. And I saw it, and I'm like, holy crap, this is amazing. It's just like telling a continuation of the story without falling into the sequel formula of doing the exact same thing. It's just like, no, we're gonna progress the story into new areas. Literally, it was by changing zip codes, right, and going to Cuba. But I don't know. I really enjoy it in terms of that, in terms of the character study and like that deliberate pacing. Because sometimes I feel movies have pacing issues and are too slow, but they don't work because it's not slow towards a goal. And Godfather does get to that goal. It explodes. And either it's it's an action explosion or it's an emotional explosion. in one way or the other, because at the end, which we'll talk about when comparing Last Jedi and Godfather, at the end when the door closes on Michael. Oh my God, I forgot Diane Keaton's character's name.
Kay.
Thank you.
Kay.
And it closes the door on Kay. It's just this scene that builds up to that moment.
Yeah.
And that moment is not a bombastic moment, but it's an emotional moment of like him becoming the Don and her being devastated. And it's just like because the cycle is set up again. So that is why that movie works for me so much. But let's take a quick break from The Godfather to go real quick into Star Wars, which is the main topic of this podcast as usual. So before going into The Last Jedi and Last Jedi versus Godfather, Josie, why don't you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Star Wars, if any at all, and tell us like some of your thoughts about not necessarily Last Jedi, but the franchise as a whole, to see where we're at.
Yeah, so I grew up watching the Star Wars films with my dad, and that is my whole thing with Star Wars. It was my connection with him. And then when it got to high school, when newer films were coming out, it felt like that moment where it was like my film, because I was alive for the sequels, but I was still too young to actually appreciate them. So Force Awakens up to like from then until now felt more like, oh, it's my time to enjoy these films. So that's my emotional connection to it, apart from like the familiar relation. I just really liked The Force Awakens. It has it's case by case the hero's journey perfectly. So for people wanting to study that, like Force Awakens is perfect for that. And yet, I mean, The Last Jedi is just my favorite Star Wars movie, and I know a lot of people don't like it.
We're fans, so
so like visually speaking, I mean, I remember I watched it almost like 10 times when it first came out.
Yeah.
In theaters.
And yes, so I really like that scene where when they start fighting together, and I'm like,
oh yeah, yeah.
It's just so visually pleasing, but it also has like the stunt coordination. It feels like a dance. It's visually engaging, and story-wise, it's not just there for spectacle. It actually moves the story forward, which I really like. Because sometimes these stories lose themselves and, oh, look how good this looks, but it never really gives you something substantial. So I like that at least Rian Johnson was trying to say something.
Yeah.
So that's
what about Rise of
Skywalker?
Skywalker?
Yeah. Oh. So I remember Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, when I saw it, I was happy because it gives you everything. Like the problem is that it's a film that gives you everything you need. But then when you look back, you're like, wait, I've been bamboozled. This has nothing substantial. It's just candy or sugary cereal. And then you're like, oh, wait, this has no nutrients at all.
Yep.
So I think that's the best description of it. Yeah. That is the best description of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty. It does what it has to do. But did you gain something? Did you feel anything other than what they wanted you to feel?
Yeah.
Nope. None of the above. It's one of those things that I really feel bad about talking about, because we, on the whole, do not like that film. I don't want to be one of those people that are like the Last Jedi haters. They just like live to this like bash a movie. So like I just want to like close the book on Rise of Skywalker. But every time someone says I don't like it, it's just like I get that twinkle in my eyes. It's like, okay, let's bash this, please. But we have to be positive and constructive here. I don't know. Last Jedi is just amazing. But
I just blame J.J. Abrams, and not in a bad way. It's that in Force Awakens, he did the whole mystery box thing where he set up so many things, and then immediately they jumped into Rian Johnson, and there was no time for. I just don't feel there was any planning when making this trilogy. So of course there were going to be a lot of loose ends, and it just ended up crashing and burning in the end because there was just no real connection or communication, I think. And I'm pretty sure they've mentioned it before. I remember when Last Jedi was happening, Rian Johnson had mentioned something like when they were wrapping Force Awakens, they had already started writing Last Jedi. So there was no outline at first. Like, for example, this is how the trilogy is going to go. It was just here, you get this one, and then by the third one, They just changed it all up. So I just lack of planning. That's the best way to summarize it.
Yeah.
And pandering to fanboys that are extremely vocal and just kind of ruined the narrative, I guess. It's also a thing that JJ not being collaborative is what I've read between JJ's and Ryan's style when they approach the films. JJ would kind of work in a vacuum in terms of writing and not really collaborate with the Lucasfilm story group and all these people that know the history of everything that's going on in Star Wars Galaxy. With in a franchise like this, you kind of have to. It's like history at this point. It's like there's things that happen that are canon that you have to acknowledge. And JJ did not play well with these people. And apparently Ryan did. He was very, he cooperated a lot with these guys, and that's why the film kind of sits well inside the Lucasfilm camp, because he played with them. And then Rise of Skywalker, JJ did his own thing, where he just disconnected from the story group, doing his own thing, and not really, tying the movie back to anything else. As he said, the movie was going to wrap up 9 films, but it only wrapped up 3. It wrapped up 4. It wrapped up the original trilogy and The Force Awakens. That's the only films that movie wrapped up.
I don't think it even wraps up that trilogy, actually.
No, yeah.
There's still a lot left unsaid, which is sad because there are literal people whose actual profession is to keep track of the Star Wars lore, and you're gonna ignore them. Like that's literally what they do for a living.
They have one job, and that is it. And you ignored their one job. Well, it's one of those things where, like you said, with the mystery. It's one of those things, like you said, where he sets up the mystery box, and the one that always annoys me is the lightsaber bullshit. It's like a good story for another time. It's like, bitch, if you fucking set up this fucking storyline, follow through. Don't give me 2 sequels and then you finish a plot thread that you yourself established. And just like Rise of Skywalker too, with the I have to tell you something, Rey. And then he never tells her and we never find out. It's just like you set up a plot in your own movie that you have to end. And within that movie, you don't even wrap that up. It's like, I don't know. Chris Terrio failing upwards, I guess.
Yeah, literally, Finn was supposed to be a Jedi. Rey had some sort of connection to Obi-Wan. Like, it was there. It was there. We hear his voice. We hear his voice in that first film. Like, he was supposed to show up in some way, and he didn't. And then we just hear him again in the final moment when she's hearing a lot of voices. And, like, you can hear Obi-Wan, and that's it. I'm like, why are you setting these things up? Like, you actually had the chance to close the trilogy, and you ignored most of the things that you set up in that first film. Why?
It just feels like a first draft. Like they just ran with it.
Well, it is like Josie was saying. There was no plan to, okay, this is what happens in the first one, this is what happens in the second one, this is what happens in the third one. Like there's a storyline going through all 3 of them. They had no idea what they were doing. I mean, in the third one, like halfway through, they still had no idea what Rey's background was going to be.
Yeah.
She was a Kenobi, she was a Skywalker, she was a nobody, and then suddenly it's like, she's a Palpatine.
Fucking Palpatine. Dumbest twist of all time. I remember in the movie theater when they were going to do the reveal, I'm like, please, no. And then they didn't. I'm like, yeah, it just doesn't
Which is so sad. Yeah, because you're setting up this woman who you're trying to fight the idea, because I don't believe in the whole Mary Sue nonsense. But you're like you're setting her up to be like they're like, she's not this. She's not a nobody, but she's not a chosen one, and she does have these abilities. And yet in the end, you make her worth as a character comes from the men in her life. Why?
Yep, exactly.
Instead of making her powerful in her own right, it has to be because of her evil granddaddy. I mean, it's
like Ryan did. Yep.
it made no sense. Yeah. So. Oh well.
Especially like then that's what like the beauty of The Last Jedi. You had that whole Rey's conscious journey to establishing, you know what, I'm capable of doing this myself, and then opening the cave, and like you see that presence, and then it's like, nope, let's just take that all away. Let's just Oh well.
Especially it's upsetting because not many people talk about Kylo as well. The fact that as a character, like ignoring what he does as a character in the film, looking at him specifically as a character, like he's a prince. He has his entire background. His mom is like technically supposed to be a Jedi. Like he has everything. He's so interesting, and his background is so interesting, and he was done dirty.
Yeah.
And the Knights of Ren, really?
Yeah, you build them up so much, and then
they go down like chumps
whatsoever. Yeah.
Like,
but no, it's so sad because you set up this beautiful arc for Kylo as well, and then this like redemption that he's trying to go through, and then there's like no payoff at the end. Like he gets redeemed and then dies.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. So he went through all that struggle, and
it's one of those complicated things where he does get redeemed, but he doesn't earn it in the movie, right? Because we're in Last Jedi, he's the co-protagonist of the movie with Rey. And Rise of Skywalker, he's like just looking for a MacGuffin, just like Rey's looking for a MacGuffin, and it's all the search of the MacGuffins. So it's like there's literally no one's character progresses in that movie. It's like, well, they started here. Exactly. Then they found the thing, and then at the end of the thing, they found another thing, and then it's like, well, I guess since I found the thing, I guess now my character developed, because finding the thing automatically means your character's in a different place now. And literally, he was in a different place, right? He was in Exegol and not in Mustafar, so I guess that's progress. So now he has to die, even though the movie's called Rise of Skywalker, or we're going to kill the last Skywalker. So.
Yeah. And then they're like, oh no, Rey is the Skywalker because she's taking the name. And I'm like, no.
Did she go to the lawyer and to get like fill the paperwork and get?
That lady was the lawyer. That's how it worked in those
times. That was a notary.
It was like, boring.
Exactly.
That was the official name change.
Yeah.
He doesn't even appear as a Force ghost to her. Oh yeah.
I know.
That was so upsetting. Like you would think they would have, or at least like more. So upsetting. So many possibilities.
Well, the thing is like, sorry.
Oh no, yeah. I remember once I was pitching to my friends that how I would have loved this trilogy, but gender bent, like Kylo being a woman and Rey being a man. I don't know. I want to see like a badass female villain in Star Wars.
Yeah, they had an opportunity with Phasma. Yeah, well, they had an opportunity with Phasma too, and then that was another failed opportunity there. I mean, they had so many opportunities with Finn, with Rose, with Poe, Phasma, even General Hux was kind of like, one-dimensional eventually. I mean, everybody became kind of like a cookie cutter version of these characters that had begun, and then you don't flesh them out either. So I don't know.
Yeah, because the thing with The Last Jedi is that even though I like it, I don't think it's perfect by any means. Again, how you mentioned, I'm still so mad with Phasma. Like you bring her back and then you get rid of her in that manner. Why?
Yep.
Boba Fetted her. Yep.
Yeah. You get so excited when you see her again, and then it's like, oh, but we're gonna kill her in like 5 minutes. It's fine.
Right. But based on that, just like how they Boba Fetted her, maybe they can Boba Fett her again and just bring her back. And the Mandalorian spinoff, and she's like, she's back. She was in some backwater planet rebuilding her armor. I don't know.
Yeah.
Everything's possible now.
Everything's possible.
Yeah. And I do love The Last Jedi a lot, but going back to what we were talking about, The Godfather, it also has that unnecessary like Canto Bite sequence is way too long and
Canto Bite is absolutely necessary. Absolutely necessary.
I think that's the best Star Wars in there. One of the best.
Canto Bite, really?
Canto Bite is doing the prequels right.
Yes.
I feel the same way as Nani. I found it a little bit of necessary, but I think if it had been done a little bit differently, I think he spent too much time on it to say something which could have been said a lot more easier, which is basically screw the system, eat the rich. Like you could have done that throughout the entire film because he was setting that up, especially with making Rey like a nobody, quote unquote. Just get rid of the chosen ones, and you were criticizing that throughout the entire film. I think he just wanted to make it super obvious, which is ironic for a Disney film. Like you're criticizing capitalism in a Disney film, but we'll talk about that. That's a whole nother topic.
Disney. Disney has some interesting cognitive dissonance in terms of like its storytelling. I was watching a Lindsay Ellis video where she's talking about that when Disney is woke and it's talking about all of these like topics, but then it's just like, but bro, you can't fucking talk about all these things when you're the corporate thing that you're talking against, doing the things that you're saying not to do.
I will criticize capitalism while sitting at Galaxy's Edge happily.
Oh, no,
I will I'll cry when I go there. I'll
you
cry.
pay
Yes.
for criticizing it.
Yeah.
I will make sure I make money out of all this.
Hey, they got it down. They know what's up. It's a science for them at this point.
Yeah.
And there are worse. There are worse studios doing worse things. At least they're, I guess, doing something and being pushed in the quote unquote right direction. But let's get now into the meat and potatoes of everything. We talked about Godfather, we talked about The Last Jedi, and obviously Rise of Skywalker. But let's now dissect Godfather versus Last Jedi. Why is The Last Jedi, according to Josie, better than The Godfather? Go.
So I just want to give a disclaimer that I had made that tweet as a joke. And I love how I've been able to see like, there are connections here. Because I think I forgot what the first tweet was, but I remember, that Kingsman was better than John Wick. And so many people, I tweeted that and went to sleep.
Angry tweets.
I woke up to like over 90 angry tweets.
No!
I was like, people take this so seriously. And then my friends were like, do it again. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it again. And it was just very amusing to see people trying to find the logic comparing these two things, which for John Wick and Kingsman for me, which is I love the choreography. And I think the stunt work should be appreciated more in the like at the Academy specifically. So there is reasoning. For The Last Jedi and The Godfather specifically, my whole reasoning was that I really like The Last Jedi, and The Godfather tends to be a film that is really beloved by specifically like people that love film and quote unquote the film bros. And Nani, totally love how you spoke about it. Like you made me rethink everything. And that day I was like, I choose violence. So, because honestly, when it comes to The Last Jedi, I think, again, as we've been discussing, it's not a perfect film by any means. And I think The Godfather is
a perfect movie to begin with, right?
I don't think so.
No.
Except for me, like Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I will fight anybody.
That's my letterbox.
I love that. But for The Godfather, it's also along the same lines. I can appreciate so many things out of it, but I can also criticize so many things out of it. And when it comes to both of them, I just like how The Last Jedi is able to deliver a message without dragging it out too long. Like if you ignore the Canto Bight scene, I think overall it has a good use of like pacing, story. The characters are very compelling. And I felt more in tune with, I really like Kylo Ren. If you haven't noticed, I like how dynamic he is as a character. Especially, I wish we had gone more into his past as an abuse. Like he has gone through a lot of emotional and mental abuse. And then he, instead of breaking the cycle, he just continues it up until the last film, which I think could have been done so well. And we see that also in The Godfather, how you have this character that wants to break the cycle of trauma and violence within his family, and then he just ends up falling for it. So I really like seeing characters that do that. The only thing is that I connected with Kylo a bit better.
Interesting. I think that's an interesting point that you make about Kylo specifically, because now that you mention it, I do think that he gets kind of ignored in the conversation. And I think it might just be because of his end in Rise of Skywalker. It was so dissatisfying for people that I think they just ignored the narrative completely and not focus on that, and just kind of tack him onto the Reylo conversation more so than the Kylo Ren conversation. But I think I really appreciated what you said in that sense, because I was originally when I was starting to compare movies in my head, I was thinking about, okay, Michael Corleone is Rey and whatnot, but now that you mention it that way, it's like, no,
it's
he's
Kylo.
Both of them. He's both of them, I feel. in a way. It's like they're the one character in him, in a sense. They're the light and the dark that live within Michael. And Vito is absolutely Luke Skywalker. No one's gonna change my mind.
Yeah, because how scared he must have been to see his like his Master Jedi Luke about to kill him.
Yeah.
Like,
Who's
how
also his
terrifying must that have
uncle,
been?
you know.
Yeah. Like your uncle literally wants to kill you.
And waking up to see him like standing over you with a lightsaber, I mean, and he was already conflicted, obviously, because he was already, you know, having some of that dark side from, you know, Anakin being his grandfather and all these things. And then to see the person that you're looking up to, like, basically threaten to kill you. How did that happen? I mean, and
literally
like
looking up.
Yeah, looking up, you know, from a very vulnerable position, you know, in bed by himself, you know. And I think what you were saying, Josie, it would have been really cool to see him like as a younger child too, like to see how his relationship was with Han and Leia, and then see that transition of like him leaving his family, how it was for him. Was it like voluntary for him as well, or was it kind of like an Anakin situation that he was kind of forcefully taken? You know, it would have given.
I think it might have been.
Yeah.
Especially like when you see a spoiler warning for Mandalorian.
Spoiler alert, people! If you haven't seen that, it happened.
Yeah,
it's very quick. Just skip over it like 30 seconds. Okay, very quick. I mean, Luke takes Baby Yoda from Pedro Pascal. Yes, because Pedro Pascal is Baby Yoda's father. From Din Djarin. You see the connection, and he still walks away. Like, you actually see his face. There's pain and hurt there, and you still take him away just to fulfill an agenda. So I'm pretty sure that contributes a lot. I'm pretty sure that Kylo Ren was probably taken away from his parents as well. And at least when it comes to Han and Leia, watching the original trilogy, I do see the appeal with them, but I've always found them, I don't think it was a very happy relationship, clearly because they don't end up together. So I growing up with that kind of dynamic, it's like living with divorced or separated parents. It was probably traumatic for him as well.
I think two points on that. One, I want to go back to the Han and Leia thing, but I had to go to something Nani said first about like the Luke almost killing, which he didn't almost kill. He thought about killing. It's not the same. But it's the inverse situation, right? From The Godfather. The Godfather, what started Michael's path to the dark side is him seeing his father almost die. So it's like that inverted situation where the mentor kind of, instead of like turning on you, you are confronted with death through the mentor. And that's that moment with when both characters, you know, start their journey towards, you know, something else from what was originally intended. So I think it's one of those cool things about like talking about these movies, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to like make all of these connections otherwise. So I'm really thankful for that tweet. Otherwise, I would never have been thinking critically about both movies framed within each other.
Yeah. I remember when it first happened, and we're like, oh, yeah, we're doing this episode. It's going to happen. I was like, how do you compare The Godfather with The Last Jedi? I mean, it's like the quintessential mob movie, slow, fantastic, but it is the pacing, everything to The Last Jedi. I was like, how do you even compare them? And then when you start watching them in the context of, you know, possibly comparing them, you see that there are some similarities there. And I think, when I was watching it, at least, I do see some parallels between Kylo and Michael Corleone and Sonny as well, because he has that, you know, jumping the gun, like violent, no control, self-control whatsoever. So he's like a combination of those characters as well. So I don't know. I thought it was cool to think about it that way.
James Caan, I always forget. Sonny is Poe Dameron. He just like jumps into the cockpit, do the fucking thing. Except that obviously this is Disney, so Poe Dameron has to live, and Godfather, well, Sonny bites the dust.
With which I know, like 50 bullets, but okay. Sorry, Josie. Sorry.
Or more.
No.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Sonny dies.
Is that I know a lot of people were upset with how Poe was treated in that film, but I think it was a perfect lead into him, because he needed a moment to really take in the fact that leadership does come with responsibilities. Because from the beginning, because people are like, oh, they made him all trigger happy in the second one, like that wasn't, and I'm like, yes, it was from the beginning. He's very impulsive, and then in the end, we want to see him as captain. We want to see him leading the rebellion, but he needs a moment to get there.
It's one of those things that I've never understood people criticizing Laura Dern in that movie, because it's like she had absolutely every reason to not trust Poe Dameron. For all she knows, he's an insurrectionist or some shit, or a spy, because Leia, his commanding officer, General Leia, told him not to do stop the attack and come back. He subverted her orders and got the fleet killed. So he might not be the best person to be put in charge and not be aware of plans, because he clearly will do what he wants. So she was in the right to keep him in the dark. So it's like, he shot himself in the foot, and that's what happens. Like, when in any military situation, when is a general ever supposed to be open and cavalier to soldiers? It's like, no, you will know about orders when I'm ready to tell you about orders.
Well, and I mean, and she points it out to him as well. It's like Leia's last official order was to have you demoted. Like, what do you expect? What did you expect, that I'm going to reveal all my plans to you when you were just demoted by, directly contravening an order? And I love what Leia says to him too after he comes back from like the bombing. He's like so proud of himself because he got rid of the dreadnought, and she's like, at what cost?
At what cost?
I mean, there were, and he's just like, oh, there were a lot of heroes there, dead ones, and no leaders. So it's just, and Poe was that way.
I just got chills thinking about that.
I know.
Ryan Johnson.
And yeah, I know. And I think as we were watching it too, El Husbando was just like, he also has this like Anakin complex too. Like, he assumes just because he's a really good pilot, everybody else is going to be as good as him. So he like goes in by himself and does all this, and then is surprised when the bombers start getting shot. It's like, have you seen how unmaneuverable those things are? You can't just expect it to work. And this is like an escape situation. And you're deciding to take that adrenaline when people are literally fleeing for their lives. So,
which is the same thing in The Godfather, when Sonny wants to join the drug trade, and Vito's like, no, don't ever contradict my orders again. And what happened? He got shot in the street. Consequence. Sonny is Poe Dameron. Boom. There we go. More parallels. Love it.
I'm loving these comparisons. I'm like, ooh, I discovered gold or something.
Let's hope it's real gold and not fool's gold. So we have to keep going.
Because I honestly think that there is a good way to compare these films, and clearly I think it speaks a lot to the depth that The Last Jedi has. It's because some people tend to write it off, and clearly there's more to it than just a Star Wars film.
Yeah.
It just transcends into like a film. It's not just a popcorn flick. It's a film.
Oh yeah. It works by itself.
We have to find who is an analog for Finn. Who would be Finn in The Godfather?
Why
is
do
so
you do
interesting.
Yeah,
he's so
because
interesting.
I wasn't expecting the Sonny Poe Dameron thing, so now I have to do Finn.
Now you have to find somebody.
I mean, he was willing to give it all for the cause.
I think there's a 1-to-1.
I don't know. It might come to us, but actually, as I was watching the second one, I think Jar Jar Binks is Fredo.
Fredo did accidentally
slower,
bring
but and Jar Jar is like slower, and if you think about him as like Darth Jar Jar, so he betrays them as well. If you think about him that way, then it's like Fredo. So,
but Fredo willingly betrayed the family. Jar Jar.
Right. Well, if Jar Jar was Darth,
unknowingly.
Yes. But if he was Darth Jar Jar, he did it knowingly.
Oh, but if he was Darth Jar Jar, he would be like, he would be Michael.
Genius.
Okay, he'd be the boss man here. Jar Jar is the key to all this, as George Lucas has said in the past.
Always is. Jar Jar is always the key to everything.
Jar Jar everything.
Oh my god, so good.
But yeah, I think that's both films try to do that. They transcend. Like, I think Goose, you said something, and Josie, you also said something. Like, they're both like psychological. They're both one tries, they try to understand the consciousness of why you end up who you end up being.
Mm-hmm.
And there's where I think probably, in my opinion, The Last Jedi succeeds over The Godfather, is that The Last Jedi presents, at least Rey, both options. You know, this is what the path that you're intended to follow. This is the path that your inner self is calling. And yet at the same time, Rey took the time to analyze it all and be okay and at peace at the end with her decision.
Until they ruined it.
Until they ruined it.
Stop there.
with Michael, you do see that evolution of like the psychology of like, okay, I have to be okay with my ending, but there's also a sense of doom. Like Michael is never since the beginning, he never affords himself the option of like, I'm not actually gonna follow the family. It's all a farce. It's always been like, yes, I just wanna be the justification for me to fall in line, versus I'm gonna explore my own psychology and then be okay with who I am, which is what Rey and Kylo did. They're all children of traumas. Like, yes, one family, the parents are together, but clearly dysfunctional. There's no communication between the mother and the father. There's a complete disconcern and lack of like structure of like, oh, we're saying family is the most important, but all of your time and everything you do is actually against the family. Like you're just there for your own interest as a power. It's a very patriarchal, like, oh, I'm the family, this is the family because I'm the man, and this is how it falls down. The Last Jedi it's a family that's made together. It's like, oh, we come from different backgrounds, we come from different places, but let's get together because we have the same cause, we have the same. It's not following a structure that's falling. It's actually building something that's already fallen from the ground up, and that's where The Last Jedi did it, at least in my way, and the way I see it, the exploration of consciousness better. And at the end of the day, that's most of my focus in films and whatever I consume is how is the consciousness being evolved, or how is it being explored. And The Godfather is just very one-dimensional. It doesn't really explore what's behind the anger, what's behind, why are you acting this way. It never, the characters never question themselves, they just act. Versus everything on The Last Jedi, every act for each character is actually a second back, a questioning from the beginning to the end, like, how did I get here? So my 2 cents.
I think
and Godfather is so boring.
I know. Boring. You said boring like 10 times today. Okay. Hey, continue, Josie.
I think that's why the Apollonia scene is in there, just to justify his actions. Because if you had taken it out, sure, it wouldn't have made a difference in the story, but at least, like, I'll give it that. At least it helps us understand why there's a shift. Because he was happy. He was legitimately all happy. He was finally about to do what he wanted to do, which was leave his family behind, leave the violence behind, and then you kill his wife, and he's like, well, I guess I have to go back.
I guess I have to go back. Like,
every time I try to get out, they pull me back in.
Yeah.
But it's a self pull. You can always say, I'm not going back. I have a very toxic family that's like, I'm not going back. You do have that.
But I think
that's what Rey does.
Also there's also something about the psychology of Michael that I think he is a lot colder and crueler from the beginning than people realize, because he seems all young and everything, but he was in World War II, so we don't know what kind of PTSD, everything that he has. And you can tell from the beginning he's very cool, calm, and collected every time that they make a decision. It's his decision as a member that's supposed to be not part of the family. He's the one that decides by himself to kill the police captain and Salazzo. Like, that's all him. And even in the way that he assumes control of the family, he's way crueler to his family than Vito ever was. So there's something detached and kind of less human about Michael, even from the beginning.
Yeah.
So when you see the transition, I mean, there's something about he was always lying to himself. I mean, when he comes back from Italy, one of the first things he says to Kay is like, in 5 years, we're going to be legitimate. And he always keeps talking about being legitimate. And it's crap. I mean, he goes and buys some hotels and then tries to like buy his way into finances in Cuba as well. So he's just like lying to himself constantly. So it's this character that I think he's even more the bad guy than Vito ever was. So, I mean, there's this.
That reminded me so much of Breaking Bad. What Mo and Nani, both of you were saying. It's Breaking Bad. It's like the psychology of a character that's deluding himself to thinking he's the good guy. And I think that's the key difference between like those, that media of Breaking Bad and Godfather, where it's the anti-hero, right? It's the morally questionable person, even though he thinks he's doing the right thing, but ultimately falls into that cycle of wrongness, versus Star Wars, right? And it's story of hope and of breaking cycles. So they're structured fundamentally different. So like that's why I think the results will always end. One will end in victory and hope, and the other one will end in death and sorrow. Because I mean, not one Godfather movie ends happy. There's always some tragic thing that happens in all three of the Godfather movies, for all of the characters. Everyone either dies or is morally corrupt or emotionally dead at some point. And Star Wars is the opposite. It's, well, unless you're Kylo Ren. Everyone lives and transcends. And even if you die as a good guy, you're able to transcend and like live on as a being of hope and positivity, unless you're Ben. And if you're a bad guy, then it's over. But it's good. It's good ultimately. And Godfather is just it's the proto Breaking Bad. It's the school teacher with cancer who thinks he's making meth to leave his family with some money, but really he's doing it for himself all the time since the beginning.
Because he had a lot of different options to how to help his family, but he went that way. And I actually think that Kylo is the opposite in lying to himself. Like Kylo lies to himself that he's the ultimate bad guy.
Exactly.
He actually senses that there's good in him. So he lies to himself about like, I am even worse than Darth Vader, blah, 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 blah. But he's deluding himself. I mean, when he has the opportunity to kill Leia, he stops. He can't do it. When he kills Han Solo, it breaks his spirit in two, and he can never get over it. So, I mean, kind of the reverse of Michael. So
I'll bet anything that Kylo Ren killed that TIE fighter pilot that threw the missile at Leia. He's like, bro, didn't you see me pull off? It's like, he killed that guy.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, he was always being manipulated but there was always a third party next to him whispering in his ear, like, yes, you're this, be this. And he never really had a moment to really find out who he was as a person. I mean, probably taken away from his parents since he was a kid, to then having to figure out what side he should be on because he's being influenced by all these people, and then finding out that, like, I mean, he killed his second master, quote unquote, like Snoke.
Yeah.
Like, he killed him. So
awesome.
I don't think he was a bad guy all the time, especially when he asks Rey to join him. It's just basically like, let's get rid of all of this and start over, because clearly all of this is corrupt. And you can actually see those influences in the sequels, like technically prequels, where like the council just doesn't want to help Anakin. And he clearly needed help.
Yep.
I think it's so fascinating that like Kylo is the most interesting character, and you could have done such a deep character study, and especially Rise of Skywalker. I think that's the movie to have done it because of everything we saw with flashbacks in Last Jedi. Like Rice's character would have been like the perfect place to like start going and see like that background of that psychology of what made him tick as a not villain, but as a just a person, period. So that he could be fully fleshed, and then we could see why he would ultimately, break away and turn back to the light instead of like, I don't even know why he went back to the light. There was some weird thing with Leia doing Skype and before passing. I know they had their hands tied, right, with Carrie Fisher passing away, rest in peace. But I don't know. There had to be a better way to like do this transition towards the light, because it's just like literally like a cut, like evil up until here and then good going forward.
He felt like a caricature of himself in that third film.
Yeah.
It was like mustache twirling villain instead of like Kylo.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I mean, everyone was a caricature of themselves in that movie.
We were.
Yeah.
Especially Poe and Finn. Oh my God. They got shortchanged the most.
Yeah, we deserve them together.
Yes.
Yes.
Disney was not going to pull that trigger. It was like I thought they were. I thought they were for a minute because Oscar Isaacs and John Boyega were very.
They were pushing for it,
and publicly, and stuff. So I was like, oh well. Sure.
They should have done it.
Yep.
But no.
They did not push any. Not even Raylo did they push. They did like, well, it's like let's just make them kiss at the end, but like in the novelization, let's just say it was a kiss of siblings or whatever it was like in the book, just in case we want to backtrack. So it's just like for the Raylos, but it's like they didn't know how to do anything, so they did everything.
Yeah, no. Ugh.
Makes it weirder.
Even weirder than Luke and Leia and Empire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least that one was based on like ignorance.
Exactly. It was based on what? I don't know. What was it?
You don't go out and like sibling love. Like I mean that there's a Game of Thrones thing going on maybe.
I don't think that's what Disney's going for. I don't think that. But it's one of those things where, right, like you literally, in terms of like going back to character development and whatnot, where like at least Godfather like finishes everyone's story in like a point. Lot like even if it's predictable or not, like everyone's story progresses in a logical way towards an end point. Rise of Skywalker, where Last Jedi set up like really interesting places for every character to go. All of a sudden, especially with Rey, it's just like it takes them nowhere. In any case, it backtracks all the way back and just leaves them exactly where they started. And where Rey's story starts alone in the desert without anyone to call family, she ends up alone in the desert without anyone to call family. Except some a mirage in the horizon. Yep. And it's like, what? She's her love of her life dead. Her two best friends, I don't know where the fuck they are. And like she's nowhere. It's like she didn't even escape the sand planet that every single Skywalker hates. No Skywalker likes that planet. Anakin was a slave there. Luke could not go to Tashi Station and get power converters. And now Rey's there burying the lightsabers of her masters that have died in terrible, well, they didn't die in terrible ways, but they died and abandoned her, and where the love of her life is also dead. And it's horrible. She's in a worse place than where she started the whole trilogy. So
it's really depressing. Yeah.
Maybe that's a subversion. I don't know if that's a subversion or not, if that's what Chris Terrio thought he was being clever by doing that. But
for me, it ends in Last Jedi. They're all happily sitting like they didn't win the war, but at least they have each other. The end.
Yeah,
that's such a good ending. It's like Rey is out of hope, and she's like, how can we build a rebellion out of this? And Leia, best fucking line in that movie. Yes. We have everything we need. Boom. And then Broom Boy, the real MVP.
Yeah.
Which is perfect because it's like the whole entire message of the film is like you don't have to win a war. The most important thing is that you managed to save your loved ones. Mm-hmm. And they did. Yeah. They survived. Not everybody, but at least like the important people. Like the people who are important to her.
And you start you start spreading the message of hope, and then like we're saying with Broom Boy, you have somebody that's not attached to any of these families, demonstrating that they have force powers, which
he's a Palpatine. Mark my words. He's a failed clone. Episode 10, he's gonna be the main villain. He's gonna show up in Rey's Jedi training temple, Broom Boy with a red broom, and bam!
To sabotage everything.
Chris Terrio is coming back for episode 10. Mark my words.
Wow, you just went.
That's if Rise of Skywalker has anything to see what Disney's doing with movies, that's what they'll do, and then they'll resurrect Luke Skywalker and just CGI his face on Arnold Schwarzenegger's body and just be like the Uber Jedi, just killing everybody. It's like, okay, well, apparently they have to pander to fanboys nowadays instead of making a good movie.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry, I guess. I don't know.
What is it? Sorry, not sorry?
Well, yeah, I'm not sorry. Yeah.
Not sorry.
No one listens to this anyway, so it's fine.
everybody. It's sad.
Well, anyway, we went off on a tangent right there. So
Yeah.
It happens.
Ryan Johnson just logged off. He's like, I heard what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I got my notes. I'm gonna keep writing Knives Out too. It's fine.
Michael Corleone is not gonna care. So.
No, Al Pacino's fine doing Adam Sandler movies.
So awkward silence now.
No, it's never awkward. It's just a meditative, a thoughtful silence.
Okay.
But I mean, we have been going on for a while. I don't know if we wanted to like have some final thoughts to kind of start wrapping this up between like our very spirited and interesting, because I think we said some really cool stuff here, comparing both of these films, Godfather and Last Jedi. If anyone had like any closing thoughts, please feel free as we wrap this episode up.
I'm just glad that my tweet started this because I love the conversations and I love the passion with which we have spoken about these films, especially like The Godfather. I've never heard anyone talk about it with such fervor and such love. So I really appreciate hearing that, because at the end of the day, again, it's all about the films. And no matter, like, it comes to the point where I think people have lost a sight of the fact that you can like a film and still criticize it, and you can also dislike a film but also appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, and I loved what you said at the beginning, Josie, that it's like, it doesn't have to be like based on genre, or you liking some movie defines you in some way, even that other people hate it and they hate you because you like that film. I mean, it's not about that. Everybody can take different things about a film. I mean, we've talked to a couple of people that actually really like Rise of Skywalker, and that doesn't make them less people, just because they like that film. And so I think the good thing about film is that, and then having constructive conversations about it. And you can take things out of films that you hate, and you can hate things about films that you love. And there's something very, like, these films are completely different genres. I mean, Star Wars being the space opera that it is, and The Godfather being that quintessential mob movie, but there are a lot of parallels that we already found. And the film is just great. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, Rey training with Luke is basically Michael in Italy changed my mind.
Interesting. I see it. I see it. Okay.
Just fetching milk, getting goats.
Apollonia is the sea cow.
Yeah, learning how to drive.
Just vibing.
Yeah, my mind's blown right now. Well, you should definitely keep up these hot takes on Twitter.
I will bring them back.
They are definitely good for very spirited discussion. Yeah. I'm surprised, honestly, that like your Twitter hasn't gotten like hostile, because I know that there's some very mean spirited
the
Twitter
only
people that
So I stopped doing it because people were taking it too seriously. And I'm like, I'm going to come back eventually. But for now, you guys need to like relax. These are jokes. But the only time I think that I got like serious replies was for when I forgot what I compared it to. But it was with Birds of Prey. And people taking it very seriously. It's like, that's not Birds of Prey. That's a Harley Quinn movie. And I'm like, I know, but I still liked it.
It was good. I like Birds of Prey.
It's fun. Yeah, Twitter taking
Suicide
serious sometimes.
Oh yeah, too serious. It's like these. These
do not take yourself too seriously, everybody. That's the key.
Or the things you like, right? Because the things you like don't care about you liking them, right? So it's like JJ isn't there like, oh yeah, look at these people defending Rise of Skywalker or Ryan. It's like, oh yeah, they don't give two shits. They're rich. They're in their mansions. They're cool. They don't care about you. So just let it go. Enjoy the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
so with that, I think this has been like a fantastic, spirited conversation. It's good for this episode. Hopefully, once more hot takes are done in the future, we can have you over and like keep talking about some of these other films, because I think it's been a breath of fresh air to. I mean, obviously, we talked a lot about Star Wars, but to be able also to talk about other films that some of us are passionate about, others not so much. It's always good so that we can widen our scopes of what things to discuss.
Yeah.
So Josie, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't you let people know where to find you?
So you can find me at the Josie Marie on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd, and you can find the Film Posers on Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube as at Film Posers.
And we'll leave all those links below. So definitely make sure to check them out. They're fantastic, and more Puerto Ricans out there as we should be. So please support all of us.
Well, anyway, thank you so much for coming, Josie. Congratulations on everything that you and Film Posters are able to do. And you should really start doing the hot takes again, because they're great. I mean, it gets thinking when you compare these films. And I agree with you. Kingsman is amazing. So
yeah, it's great.
Yes, that's the one I stand by.
It's fantastic. So people,
not the Golden Circle though. The first.
No,
the first.
But the first one was
the first one.
Yes.
Well, at least Golden Circle had Pedro Pascal. So
true, and Elton John.
And Elton John.
Yeah. It had its moments. It was still good.
It had its moments, but it wasn't. Yeah.
But anyway, I love that people stop taking yourselves too seriously. Sometimes it's a joke. Sometimes it makes you appreciate a film in a different way when you compare it to something else. So keep that in mind. We are the Triad of the Force. You can find us in Twitter at the Triad of the Force. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on anywhere that podcasts are found. And so, like us, subscribe, leave comments. You hate us as well. All part of the conversation. So I think with that, thank you for watching, listening, whichever one you're doing. And I think with that, may the Force be with you. Good night.